new album, Combobulated, and
Combobulated.
Combobulated, yeah, and it sounds awesome, man. It's like the trio is really evolving.
Oh, thank
And
you.
I've heard the footage also that you guys did in January this year in Galerie Merz in Linz on
Yeah,
YouTube. Yeah, and
yeah,
it's really burning since you're improvising and it's a lot incredible live trio band, and also the new album was recorded basically live.
it
And
was.
yeah, and I wanted to ask you, like, how did you approach this differently than a studio album, like especially with this trio, because it's like improvised music? Are there differences that you see in this trio in a studio or a live performance?
Well, yeah, yes and no. I mean, the energy in front of an audience is always going to be different, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be a better record. I mean, you can have a really burning gig, and it might just be a burning gig. It may not
Yeah.
be something that somebody's really going to want to listen to over and over and over again. I guess over half of our records were recorded live. It's just the first two. The first two were done in the studio.
Oh, Pool School, yeah, and yeah.
Pool School was done in the studio, and the one called Camino Cielo Echo.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Exactly.
Was also done in the studio, and then everyone since then has been a live recording, and it wasn't. I guess the next one, which was Hotel Grief.
Yeah.
That was, we recorded that, hoping we would get something out of it, but you never know. It was one night at Cornelia Street. But after, when I heard it, I could imagine putting it together and making something out of it. And then the last one was different than the others because it was a live gig, but the live gig was actually in a studio. It's a venue in called Firehouse 12, and it's a great venue. But they have a control room, and they have an engineer present, and so they record everything and they archive it. And I had no design to release it, but upon hearing it, I could hear the potential of it being a record more so than a gig, because this is the first one that I did more extreme editing to it. I had more extreme post production with David Torn, getting involved and kind of help shape it. So I really wanted it to be a studio record, but it just happened to be. Wanted it to really come across as a studio record, as far as like the sound quality, and also just some stuff that, I mean, we can make pretty good decisions that will give the illusion of composition. But
that's what I wanted to ask you.
I took even more liberties with kind of piecing together. I mean, some stuff is left intact. There's a couple pieces that are just the way they went down. But there's other things that we married one part to another part, and we shortened this and we added this. We did a certain amount of editing that that Torn and I kind of collaborated on.
Yeah.
So that was really the, and so it kind of maybe comes off a little more as a studio record than the previous two, which were really just live gigs with very little. I just might have shortened something, but I didn't really do much in the way of actual editing.
Yeah. But you still kept it improvised, right? Completely improvised.
The music's always improvised.
With this trio,
we've never played a composition. We've actually never even tried to plan anything. It's always been very spontaneous. There's no. The only direction I give basically is I decide how loud we play. I decide when we start and when we stop, and and that's about it. I mean, everybody's pretty free. But we've sort of developed this chemistry that from where I'm sitting at the drums, I can sort of nudge it where I want to nudge it, and they have and Mary and Ingrid's ability to listen to each other and to create something is pretty phenomenal. The way they can really, even I'm like, it sounds like they're playing a song that I don't know or something, because they just really hear each other harmonically, and and the way they phrase together. And so it's a pretty easy band as a band leader to just kind of.
I wanted to ask you that. How did you? I mean, in a way, it makes sense. Like for Monik yesterday said, Mike, that if there was two musicians he would choose for Island, like it would be like the trio he's working now with Tim Berne and with Mary, like and you know, everyone loves Mary, including me, like her style. But how come you chose? I mean, Ingrid is also as your partner and an incredible saxophone player. But how come you decided for this trio in the beginning when you formed it? How was the story of the formation of the trio?
Well, it kind of fell into my lap, actually. It was Ingrid was just starting to come to New York after we decided we were going to be together.
Mm-hmm.
She started, spending and eventually moving to New York. So I was, I think she might have even set up a session or something with Mary, but Mary didn't know her, but Mary knew me. So she can sort of say, would you do a session with me and Tom? So she agreed to it. And there was something there. It wasn't like I immediately went, oh, this is going to be my band, but I mean, I always was interested in Mary from the very first time I heard her. I thought she was really kind of a unique guitarist.
Different, yeah.
That had a very strong presence, musical presence. And then Ingrid, actually, I think she somehow or other managed to get a gig for the three of us at the Old Issue Project in New York. And but we were trying a lot of different things around that time, and we played with a couple of different bass players. Just
really
improvised gigs. I mean, not that I was trying to find a band, but the timing just sort of, it was like a perfect storm of timing, and just kind of the right time for me. I was not, because I never really had much of a desire to lead anything.
Yeah.
So, but I was really, at that point, I was actually interested in creating some opportunities for Ingrid and I to play together. And so I thought, after we did the gig, I thought the gig went nice, but I mean, it was really more potential at that point. So I think I'm just going to say this is my band, and I'm going to get a record deal. And I did. I mean, a record deal. I got clean feed to make a record.
Yeah.
And then I kind of through Mary's help, I got the first agent that I worked with, and then somebody had a tour, and I didn't really do. It wasn't really a lot. I mean, it's just kind of like just happened. It was pretty, I hate to overuse the word organic, but it was a pretty organic process. Yeah. Like, well, we have a nice chemistry. We get along. It's a sound, not that we're the first, sax guitar trio in the world, but I mean, it's a particular sound. It doesn't really sound like anybody else's sax guitar trio. And that was kind of enough for me to just, I just sort of assumed the band, and from Ingrid, and then Ingrid ended up forming a really great band that also Mary was in, called Anti-House. So we said both, and that really features her compositions. Yeah. So it was just, we just kind of all found each other at the right time, and Mary was enthusiastic about it. She really liked playing with Ingrid and I. So so it was, and it's been really great ever since. We did a tour and had a very nice tour last January. It was really one of the last tour that I had in Europe, so it's still happening. I'm not sure exactly what the future is as far as when or what the next record will be, but well, I'm sure we'll always be involved with each other, in some capacity.
I mean, when you see it, I mean, you did like, I don't know, 300 albums, 200, I don't know, like an incredible amount of creative music as a sideman, as a drummer. And now as being a band leader, how do you see yourself as a band leader?
Well,
how do you feel in this skin? I mean, like...
Well, to me, it doesn't really matter. I mean, it's because, I mean, if I'm playing with music with people that I like, and the chemistry is good, and whatever the business is okay, I'm perfectly happy to just do that. I mean, I don't have a great yearning to be the band leader, but the two bands that I sort of started, I do really like them a lot because there's the chemistry, and because it's also easy because it's not like we can just get together and play, and we have to, and these days with people's schedules, it's great to be ambitious, but if you're a little too ambitious, you never really get your music played properly because you just can't get people. that you want to play with just don't have the time because everybody's, you know, busy doing all stuff. So one thing I definitely chose, it was really a choice, is whatever band I have, I don't want to have music on stage. I don't want to have music stands on stage. I want to figure out something we can do that we're improvising or it's music that we know. And so that's why I also started the quintet. You know,
yeah, I wanted to ask you about that. Yeah,
well. Because same thing. I just wanted everybody to be really present in the music all the time and not be distracted by, you know, or when did we go to a coda, and, you know, did I mess up last A section, and, you know, and all that kind of stuff. Because of that, because I just know the people that I want to play with, and plus I'm not composing anyway, so it just this was just, you know, my way of feeling like I'm contributing something, but I have to, you know, I don't have to design the whole thing. I mean, it's you know, I because in all the bands that I'm in, it's also that way. I mean, I never feel like I'm the sideman.
No, definitely. Yeah, I mean, you have this strong, really long musical relationships, like and
it's very collaborative, and I don't, you know, I mean, ultimately the leader has the final say, but most of the people I work with, they give me the room to figure it out. You know, they're not too dictatorial in, you know, what they. So, you know, I definitely want to extend that, you know, to the people that I play with. I want everybody to really be free, but I want us to be free over these forms, or I want us to be free thinking of, you know, playing compositionally, even if we're not, you know, even if we're composition, you know. So, and that's, you know, it's just sort of, I mean, I'll admit that I'm lazy enough to where this scenario suits me fine, you know. I don't need, I'm just not, I'm not so ambitious that, you know, if it was too much trouble to lead a band, I'm sure I wouldn't do it. But so far it's been relatively easy, you know.
Yeah.
Even booking the last tour was surprisingly, I mean, I've always had agents, and this last time I actually did it all myself. And even that was surprisingly easy. You know, I mean, I did some work, but I didn't, it just kind of started coming together pretty fast. And so I didn't, you know, so that's fine, you know.
Yeah. No, you mentioned lazy. That's like far from, like, ever since Pool School, the first record, I mean, under your name, as you know, it's you've done like tons of work with this Obbligato, the quintet also, and like I think you've done like 7 records as a, you know, I think it's 7 or 6 or 7.
Maybe something like that. Yeah, there's 2. There's a new Obbligato coming out, which is a live gig.
Oh, wow! Also,
coming out next year, and I think it comes out next April.
I want to ask you about this quintet. Like, I mean, in a way, like the trio with Mary and Ingrid, for me, it's really you. You know, it's natural because, you know, you've been doing this creative stuff for the last 30 years. But on the other hand, it's not a surprise also that you did standards, because you played them with Fred Hirsch and Kenny Werner and all these guys. So, but it's the way how you approach them. And I wanted to ask you, like, how come you decided to do those standards? In a way, it's natural, it's connected to you, and like it's an extension of, I think, the Lark band that you had before. That's why the members, right? But still, like, it's quite surprising. How come you decided to do this other group as well, like simultaneously with the trio?
Well, I've always, I mean, going back to the time when I was playing with Kenny and Fred, I've had a long-standing relationship with playing standards, you know, and I really a lot, and to me, you know, I can feel as free within a form of, you know, Stella by Starlight as I can feel, you know, completely open. But I also, because I like it so much, and because I have, you know, in kind of a, you know, a certain amount of respect for the music that's come before me, I didn't want to just have a band that's playing standards in the same way that every other band is playing, you know, that most bands that I hear play standards, you know, it's really a vehicle for soloists. And this band, there's no real soloists in this band. I mean,
it's really collective, it's amazing.
People are featured, you know, people have their moment that they're kind of in the spotlight, but it's nobody ever takes like 3 choruses of a solo, really, without somebody else eventually getting involved and improvising.
Mm.
But I just really wanted the approach to be a group improvisation, but it's on these forms, you know.
But did you tell the guys, like when you started this, when you
Yeah.
when you did the first one, you told them what the idea is, or?
Yeah, for sure.
Oh, okay.
It's something I'd been thinking about for a while. You know, it wasn't like I just. I mean, I'd been imagining this for a while, and then when the time came where I just, you know, I wanted, because Intact was very, you know, the record label that I'm on has been very supportive, you know, and I just thought I need something else. If I want to put out a record every year or two, you know, I think I need to have another band. So it's basically been alternating between the two.
Yeah.
And I just didn't want to have another group, you know, that was completely improvised, but I still wanted it to have a lot of freedom. So I just, you know, and so the material was just basically are the songs that we all knew, that we, you know, that nobody needed to have the real book out for, you know, and so I just, you know, I just suggested songs, and then everybody goes, yeah, we know that one, so okay, we'll do that one. So now we basically been playing the two sets of music, the same songs ever since. We basically play the first record and the second record on every
Really? Oh, wow.
and even in the same order for the most part.
But do you change them, or do you keep the idea kind of like how you play them?
The tempos are usually the same because it's sort of like, I mean, I think of it as a whole set, and it's just in the way the way the music, you know, the way that the tunes flow in and out of each other.
Yeah.
I couldn't really come up with a better scheme than that. And so everybody's, I mean, it doesn't mean that they're going to sound exactly the same every time, but you know, roughly the tempos are going to be the same. Yep. Roughly the intensity might be the same, but within that, it's still you know, you know, pretty much anything can happen. There's some very light arranging where I might suggest that I'd like, you know, Ingrid to start this by herself for a chorus or something like that. I might want Drew to start something for a chorus. You know, but that's basically it when it comes to arranging. And you know, and I might put something in 3 that used to be in 4. You know, just because I want to play it exactly the same as, you know, everybody else has played it. So, you know, there's, you know, little considerations like that. But I just really wanted it to be where everybody is involved in the music at all times. You're not checked out for like 5 minutes while the rest of the band solos. You know, that you're even if you're not playing, you're involved because something might, you know, somebody might play something that you know, that inspires
triggers you to
join in. So I just wanted that that kind of you know, mix to be, you know, always there.
I wanted to ask you one thing about feeling free within the form and also your improvisation. Like I talked with Michael Serene about it. He's like, he's you know, a huge admirer of you, like I am, and you know, he's only a couple of years younger than you, and he said like you have like the most determination and certainty that you start an improv with. You know, I know that as well. Like, you know, you can play a snare drum for, you know, I don't know, 20 seconds, 30 seconds, just a snare in a certain sense. And how do you envision improv on drums when you start, or even with the trio that, you know, I think everything you do, like in improv, in any situation, is just like, back, it's there, and then you stand behind it. How did you learn that or train your mind to do that? And you basically don't sound repetitive, you know, you're always like water.
Well, I mean, thanks to you, and thanks to Mike, and vice versa. I mean, I've been a huge fan of Mike's ever since I first heard him.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, you know, the first word you used was envisage. You know, the improvisation. I try definitely not to do that because you know, if you have a vision of something, then you're gonna sort of, I guess, be inclined to go towards that vision, regardless of what else is happening around you. So as much as I can, you know, I'm blank. I really am, and even to the point where I'll find myself trying to envision, you know, how maybe we'll start the gig tonight or something like that. And the minute I find myself doing that, I shut it down. I say, yeah, you could do that, but let's just get to the gig first and see what the room's like, you know, see what the vibe is like, see what, you know, maybe what the other musicians want to play, you know. So it's usually something that's related, that I hopefully is related to something that I heard. And, you know, I mean, if I start it myself, then it might just be, okay, I want to hear that snare drum pop, and then we'll take it from there.
Yeah.
But if not, it's going to probably be a reaction or a comment on something that I heard, and then hopefully when it's going well, that just continues for 45 minutes, an hour. You know, where it's just, you know, that we're all in that web, you know, each other's web.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
So you know, somebody makes a move, then you're in the same web, so you're going to move with them, you know, or against them, you know, but it's going to be in relationship to what they're doing, and not just to what your agenda might be, because you had a nice vision about how an improvisation could go, you know. So I mean, it's that, I mean, that's the goal, you know, is just to be as you know, blank as possible, and then start filling it in, you know, as the music, you know, just see where the music wants to take it, you know. And but everybody I play with has a pretty good sense of pacing, has a pretty good sense of, like, you know, well, we've been playing very loud and intense for a while, maybe it's time to, you know, like, find another zone or another avenue to stroll down, you know. So it is. I mean, when I'm improvising, I kind of take it very literally, you know, that I'm really improvising. I'm not trying to present something that I've put a lot of thought into. You know, one could do that, and maybe that's a good idea for somebody, but in my case, especially in this band, I don't see the need for that. And that doesn't, you know, obviously that means sometimes you're willing to go out and maybe have a gig that wasn't necessarily as exciting as the other gig, you know.
Sure.
But that's going to happen regardless. I mean, that's going to happen no matter how you prepare. You know, you're going to have inspired gigs and you're going to have less inspired gigs. And hopefully the less inspired gigs are inspiring enough that people don't want their money back after the night. You know, but I you know, I take that, I'll take that approach. That approach works for me, because it just keeps me fresh, keeps me kind of involved and listening, and I don't just start, you know, just knowing, okay, we're going to play really fast for a while, and then we're going to, you know, kind of go into a rock thing, you know, or whatever. You know, I mean, I don't really need to. I don't want to do that. That works well for lots of people. You know, they kind of, you know, plan events. And you know, maybe someday I'll want to do that with somebody, but for now it's good.
But were you like that in the beginning when you started, like this? Because you just started
when I started playing drums.
Playing drums, like this. That you had this creative touch already in the beginning, or did you start like? Of course, you did, like with rock, I guess, and blues and stuff, right? But like, did you already back then see these ideas, like that you wanted to try things and?
Well, I mean, all I really ever wanted, ever since probably when I was about maybe even 10 years old, even before I was, I mean, I used to play when I was a little kid. I always played drums, but it was a hobby. It wasn't.
When did you start? At what age?
Probably before I remember. My dad kind of put drumsticks in my hands before I remember, you know.
Oh, wow.
And I just always had a practice pad. I always had drumsticks, and then eventually I got a marching drum, and then eventually I got a snare drum and a hi-hat. You know, my mom was smart about it. She kind of just to make sure I was really, before she bought me a huge drum set, she made sure that, like, all right, is he still into it? So by the time I was 13, I got my drum set. And by the time I was 13, I was probably pretty sure I wanted to do that, as much as a 13-year-old can know what he wants to do.
Sure.
And but then, you know, at that point, it was just like, well, can I copy this Buddy Rich solo? Can I copy this? I mean, I was just, you know, just looking for, you know, things that I liked and trying to see if I can do them.
Who were the heroes? Like, I mean, the heroes. Who were the drummers you really liked? Like, when you were like a teenager.
I mean, when I was really young, it would have been like, you know, Mickey Dolenz of the Monkees. You know, I mean,
Wow, cool.
because that was, I mean, like I said, I was like 10 years old. I was really into the Monkees, you know, and you know they were, of course, they were a fake band on a television show, but that's what I wanted to do with my life. I wanted to, you know, be around my friends and have adventures, and then at the end of the day, go play some music, you know, and that's what the Monkees did every week. You know, they had an adventure, and at the end they would be playing a tune together. You know, and that to me was like, yeah, that's what I want to do. So I mean, I still do. I mean, that part hasn't really changed at all. I want to, you know, be in a band with my friends and have adventures, and then play a tune at the end of the night. You know,
that's beautiful.
You know, that's kind of, it's sort of, that's the whole thing. But obviously, the music's changed.
Yeah,
you know,
sure.
as I got more into music, and I started asking more questions about it and getting turned on to different things, you know, my interest in the music. I don't listen to Monkey records very often anymore, but I actually might. You know, I'm actually, not so long ago I did. I said, I wonder what some of these Monkey songs would sound like. Some of them sound good. They were actually some really good songs. You know, but it was just a complete manufactured band for television.
Yeah.
But then of course then I got into big bands for a while. I thought maybe I want to be a big band drummer. I was into, you know, jazz rock, which became.
But you played also in big bands, like at that time, or
high school.
Like marching. Yeah. Oh well.
In high school, I played in what they called stage band, which is a big band. You know, and so that's. I mean, every day I would rehearse, and we'd always do a concert every couple times a year, and. So yeah, I mean, I was.
That was on the West Coast, right?
Yeah, that was in Santa Barbara where I grew up.
Yeah.
But I was way into big bands. I was really into Stan Kenton, which I guess isn't cool to say anymore because he turns out to be a real dickhead. But I was really into Buddy Rich. I was really into Duke Ellington. I was really into Thad Jones, Al Lewis. You know, that was, but then that sort of gave away to, you know, combos, and then I was just. Then I was just pretty much obsessed with John Coltrane and Miles Davis, you know, and then that led me to blah blah. You know, then it just keeps going, you know. But every step of the way, it was basically the same. It was like, this is music I'm interested in pursuing, and I want to be in a band that does that. You know? And that hasn't changed in 50 years. You know? And even more than 50 years.
And then you moved like. Early 80s to the East Coast, right?
Well,
how did you decide to do that?
In the 70s, I went to college in Boston. I went to Berkeley.
Oh yeah, okay. And then New York was natural.
Well, I went back to California for a year because when I dropped out of Berkeley because I was, you know, I didn't want to be there anymore. So I went back to California for a while, and you know, back then I had a band. I mean, I had people I really wanted to play with. You know, my favorite bass player, you know, that I was in high school with was there, and you know, he turned me on to this guitar player. So I really wanted to go back, and I thought I wanted to go back and play with them, and I did. I mean, I went back for a while, but then by then I already had the bug that I had to get to New York because I just all the music I was most into, it was all being done in New York. You know, and the majority of the people that I was interested in lived in New York. So I mean, it was obvious that if I'm that serious about it, I should move to New York. And so I did that in 1978.
Wow. How was like that for you in the beginning when you came in 1978 to New York?
I drove back. It was rough. You know, I mean, but I was slowly meeting people that were like, you know, so inspiring to me, you know. And the bass player I used to play with Kenny Werner was really the one.
Ratso Harris, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
He was. I mean, you know, he'd already been in New York for a couple of years, and he was really on the scene. You know, a lot of people knew him. He was playing with lots of famous people. He was playing with John, Betty Carter, and you know, stuff like that. And then we had gone to a music camp together in California. We were from different parts of the state, but we were for 2 years. We were in music camp together, and he kicked my ass, like, because he was a total prodigy. I mean, he was like the most amazing musician I'd ever met at that point. And he was older than me, and he had experience, and I had none. You know, I was like, I think he was 16 and I was 14 or something like that.
Oh wow.
And I thought I was really good because at home in Santa Barbara, everybody was always telling me I was really good, and nobody was ever complaining about me. But I got to this music camp with better musicians, and I got my ass handed to me. And it was like, and Ratso was a big part of the reason, because I wasn't taking care of business. You know, I'm not sure I was dragging. I didn't have the experience to really direct a big band very effectively. But although I thought I did, but I mean, I left so depressed. And then Ratso, a few months later, put out a record. They always put out a record of all their concerts of the music camp. And so Ratso wrote me this beautiful letter. He was like 16, and he's just telling me, like, I know I gave you a hard time, but I heard the record. You ended up getting it together okay, and maybe here's some suggestions for you. He's giving me suggestions on how to get better.
Oh,
and he's just 2 years older than me. I'm like, holy shit. So anyway, I kind of would see his name in Downbeat every now and then, because I used to read Downbeat all the time, and Ratso was in New York, so I tracked him down. And I said, hey, remember me? We were in music camp together. He said, well, not really. I mean, he sort of remembered.
Yeah.
And then we hooked up. I mean, he saw something in me that he wanted to play with. So he started turning me on, like with Kenny. I met Kenny.
Kenny Berne, yeah.
I met Mike Knock, was the first real gig I had, through him. He was really responsible for, me kind of
getting in the scene, or
slowly getting on the scene a little bit, and that. And so we played, I played with him more than anybody for the first 10 years I was in New York, I'm sure.
Yeah, you're like really connected with piano trios, like Kenny Berner's and Fred Hirsch's, also like Forward Motion and those Dancing in the Dark records. How did you meet Fred then? Like this was also in the 80s, right?
I think I met Fred through Ratso, actually, too. I mean, we might have done a session together. We never really worked together with Ratso. Mm-hmm. But I knew Fred for years, and we first band we were in was a band of Jane Ira Bloom's that Ratso was also in.
Yeah.
And that was a really cool band in the mid 80s. And then so we kind of started really playing together around that time. And then we didn't really have the easiest time of it. I didn't really know how to play with Fred. It took me a while.
Oh wow, really?
Fred is he's pretty particular about what about his taste. I mean, and what works for him. And we liked each other. We were friends, and I think we were. I totally respected him. I thought he was amazing, but I just couldn't. There wasn't what I would say was chemistry there. Mm-hmm. But when we started playing with Drew, that really changed. That then suddenly we developed this chemistry.
Yeah, it's an amazing trio.
I think is real special. So yeah, that's kind of how that happened. But that was all kind of around the same time. And there was a period where I was playing in Fred's trio, Kenny's trio, and Simon Nabotov's trio. So
yeah, I wanted to ask you, about Simon. I listened to this one today, the duo. You guys steady now. How did you meet Simon?
When he was in New York. I mean, he was living in New York. I mean, his family immigrated from the Soviet Union. So I met him, maybe just a year or two before he moved to Cologne. He's been in Cologne now for,
yeah.
But I don't know. We just met through. I mean, first time I really remember playing with him was I subbed in a band of Perry Robinson's. He used to play with Robinson, and he had this band. And then I subbed a couple times, and then I think eventually then he hooked up with Elias, and then I guess I was already playing with Elias, so then somehow or other that became Simon's trio for a few years.
Yeah. But I wanted to ask you this one thing that's like, when did this happen for you that you slowly started going into this more creative scene, in a sense of from standards to like, more improvised music? Was this already in the mid 80s, late 80s, or?
Oh, I would say that was always there, but it wasn't. I mean, since I was a teenager, I would go play like improvised duos with anybody, and so there was a amazing saxophone player that I used to play quite a bit with Ratso. We hardly ever did any gigs because he was even less ambitious than I was when it came to like doing stuff. But he was one of the most forceful, powerful saxophonists that I ever played with at that point. His name was Mel Ellison, and nobody really knows unless you're in New York, late 70s or early 80s. I'm sure you wouldn't know. So I would go over every chance I could. I'd go over to his place and we would improvise, you know. But there wasn't anything we actually seriously considered we could do in public.
Yeah.
And I used to do that, but I was doing that with Tim Berne in the 80s. I mean, I was doing that we were doing a lot of improvising, but it was really almost more of it was just for our own fun.
Yeah.
And somewhere like maybe late 80s, somebody decided, well, maybe we can just do a gig like this. You know, I said, really? You mean just go out and improvise and not have it? And we did. I mean, actually, Tim's band Paraphrase was one of the first real dedicated bands I was in that improvised and made records and did tours and, you know, and stuff like that. Before that, I'd never really considered that was possible, you know, because I just thought, well, you need to have something prepared when you go out, and it still can be frightening, you know, to walk on stage and not have any idea how it's going to go. But we did a tour, and that tour was, to my feeling, was just as successful as any other tour I'd ever done. It was, you know, heavily scripted. So that was a real wake up, you know, that this is actually possible. You know, you can just go make stuff up with your friends, and people will be entertained by it. You know, and every now and then you might come out with something brilliant. Sometimes you're gonna come out with something probably, you know, hopefully not too boring. But you know, that process definitely intrigued me and but not at the expense of playing composition. I mean, I'm not. Yeah, sure. I play with. Fortunate enough to play with some of my favorite composers in the world, and I definitely don't want to, you know, ever give that up. But it's a nice counterbalance to, you know, working very hard on difficult music, or, you know, or playing songs and then just going, okay, let's just go play. You know.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you one thing. You mentioned that my favorite composers in difficult music, and for me that's Tim Berne. I mean, I've been a fan for 20 years, probably 25. I don't know, more. And you know, Big Satan is one of my favorite bands ever. Like the trio, it's incredible. And I wanted to ask you, when did you start? When did you meet Tim? And how did you develop this connection, this telepathy almost with him? You have like this amazing thing. When did you start playing with him?
Well, Tim and I met in the early 80s. I'm not exactly sure, but 82 maybe. 80.
Oh wow, that early already. Wow.
Yeah, we used to live in the same neighborhood in Brooklyn. I was living in a house with Kenny Werner and a couple of other musicians, and we could play there like any time of day or night because it was really in a really very kind of rough neighborhood, but there was nobody around to complain about us playing all night. So we used to have all night sessions with tons of people who come by. But Tim just lived a couple blocks away. And I'm not even exactly, to be honest with you, I'm not really sure how we met, but it was around that time. And I remember doing sessions. He would come over to the house and we would do sessions. And then the first time we ever did a gig together, Tim and Zorn had a gig, and it was playing, he wanted to play the music of Ornette Coleman. And so Tim, it was Zorn's gig with Tim and Ratso.
Oh yeah, that was that quartet. Yeah, yeah.
But it was never, I mean, nothing really ever happened. We did one gig. You know?
Oh, okay.
But that's kind of the first time I really worked with Tim. And then that, you know, we never played with Zorn again. I think Tim went on to play with Zorn again. But
yeah.
I never really played with Zorn again. But then Tim put together a band with Ratso and Bill Frisell and Herb Robertson. And that was the first time. And that was really eye-opening for me, because that was one of the first times I did a gig that was not standard based. Even if it wasn't standards, most of the people I knew that were writing tunes were writing like lead sheets. This was the first time that somebody was writing something that, you know, that was really more through composed and not necessarily in time, and not necessarily, you know, I mean, some of it was, some of it wasn't. And that was like, I didn't really know what to do with a lot of it, because I just, you know, I didn't really have that experience of, you know, I wasn't really part of the avant-garde at all. I mean, I was always
Yeah.
improvising with people, but I was never really, you know, I wasn't really doing the gigs I was doing. It was usually probably mostly standards, playing with singers,
Yeah.
playing, you know. And so playing Tim's early music, you know, from the '80s was like, holy shit, this is another way of doing it. And then, you know, then we just, okay, you know, then he'd have some different bands, and then he'd come back and hire me. You know, I mean, we're still like, I mean, he's still one of my best friends. I see him more than I see anybody else. And, but at least musically right now, we're not so much involved with each other, but I'm sure, you know, in some capacity we will always be. And, so yeah, so that was the beginning of what became a.
But how did you start? How did you deal with these compositions? Like you mentioned, they're like really heavy, right in the beginning. When you saw like probably those long tunes and complicated compositions, how do you still now, let's say, deal with such long music? And in the beginning, especially since you didn't do it, how did you know what to do? You know, like did Tim tell you stuff, or did you just like go into it? Or
not really. I mean, I don't recall him really. He might tell me like, you know, ignore this or something like that. Just don't, you know, like don't let that happen and don't play with, you know, and which, you know, probably at that time was something that never really occurred to me, that like, because my tendency would be, oh, I hear something, I play with it. You know, he might say, you know, like, don't worry about this written bit. I don't want you to, you know, let us do that and you do something. You know, I mean,
okay, yeah.
But his music back then wasn't quite the same. It didn't become necessarily, it wasn't quite as epic, you know, and it was a lot more kind of rubato pieces, and it was he was you know, he was beginning to go towards the stuff that he would later do with you know, Satan and Blood Count and, you know, and
Science Friction and all those stuff. Yeah.
But back then it wasn't really that, you know, he wasn't there yet as far as you know, how he was composing, you know, he was. And I don't know. It's just, I think we just kind of grew with each other, maybe, you know, also, you know, it's just like, but you know, I mean, one of the things that he's really good at is you know, he's patient enough. Like, I mean, if, you know, you're working on a tune and it's not necessarily really working all that great right away. You know, he doesn't get too freaked out. I mean, he would allow me a chance to figure out, you know, how I want to approach this, what sound do I want to, you know, how literal do I want to be, you know, just, you know, he helps, you know, gives me a space to, you know, kind of orchestrate and so that's, you know, it's a process, you know. I mean, like the first gigs are usually pretty horrifying because you know, the first time, even if you think you're rehearsed, you're never rehearsed as much as you think you are. And the gig is always going to be its own entity anyway. So I don't care how well you played it in rehearsal, you still have to perform it, and that's a thing, you know. So I think we just sort of tacitly accept that, you know, they're like, yeah, this is a process. It might be a few gigs before we really hit on something, you know, and that's, you know, so I think that's how I negotiate it. Is there's not a lot of pressure to know exactly what I got to do. It's not like somebody bringing in a bebop tune, and in order for that bebop tune to work, I know there's certain things I have to do, you know, in order to satisfy what the composer's intention. You know, it can be open. You know, it might change. You know, tempos might change. You know, I mean, you know,
it's incredible.
It's kind of a, you know, it's a living organism, and you know, and
it's a living organism. That's a good one. Yeah, that's true.
Yeah. So, but I mean, it's just kind of, again, it wasn't really like there was no real moments of like, oh, this is what I'm going to be doing. This is how I want to do it. You know, it's just I don't think there ever will be. I mean, I think the one thing I've accepted is I'm never really going to arrive anywhere, you know, that's permanent as far as my musical expression. You know, I mean, for all I know, in 5 years, I'm going to decide I just want to play country music. You know, I mean, I doubt it.
No.
But
I know.
You know, but maybe I'll hear it and I'll go, oh, shit, that's the music I want to express that music. You know, I don't know.
Yeah.
And but I just don't want to be stuck. You know, and so and it just, again, organically, that's sort of what happens, because it's just, you meet somebody through somebody, and they have a slightly different take on maybe how to play music than that person did, and so you shift over here a little bit, And, I don't really see that changing, from now on. I'm not going to get to the point where I found it. This is what I'm going to do.
Yeah, no, definitely. Yeah, sure.
Yeah,
definitely. Tom, I just wanted to ask you one last thing. Like one of really long-standing relationship musical you have is also the Open Loose Trio with Elias and Tony. And when did you meet those guys? Well, because now it's kind of all this, everything is blended together. But like you and Tim and all these guys are a little bit earlier than Tony, let's say. But when did Mark come into the scene? Like when did you meet him and Tony afterwards, later? I mean.
Well, Mark, I definitely knew first because I had toured with him and recorded some records with him before Tony came on the scene. Mm-hmm. I think I first met Mark. Probably it must have been early '80s, and I was over at the sax player I was telling you about. He lived in Midtown, 46th Street in Times Square. And it was this building with a bunch of musicians, and Jim Payne, who's a drummer, lived across the hall from him. And they were having like a jam session, and I remember Ray Anderson being there. I remember Mark Elias being there. I think Alan Jaffe, guitar player, was there. And it was basically, it might have been the first time that this band, the Slickophonics.
Oh, yeah.
Maybe got together. I don't think they were a band. I don't think they were a band yet. I think it was
cool.
They were just jamming, and then maybe But I think we were all jamming. But I'm pretty sure that's the first time I met Mark. The first time I remember playing with Mark was doing a club date, which I don't know if in Slovenia a club date's the same thing, but it's basically a function. It's like a wedding or something. It was on a boat going around Manhattan. It was some kind of party, and this friend of ours, this piano player, got this gig, and it was basically playing pop music and a couple, standards.
Seriously? Oh, cool. Oh, wow.
And Mark had all kinds of attitude about it. Like he just didn't wear a tux. It was like, he was just like, he was like a badass. And I thought, well, this guy's pretty cool. But then after that, he actually had a gig. He was going to do a tour with a band with Freddie Waits was supposed to be the drummer in. Yeah. And then Freddie passed away, Nasheet Waits' father.
Yeah.
And Freddie passed away right around that time. And so he had this gig in New York a couple nights with a band with Herb Robertson, Tim Berne, and Anthony Davis.
Oh, wow.
And so I guess because through Tim, I'm not sure, but I ended up on that gig. And that was the first time we'd done a gig. And then he had a tour that was on the books that I think Freddie was supposed to make, which I unfortunately could not. And so he asked me to do the tour. And that was actually the first real tour I did in Europe. I'd been to Europe quite a bit with Kenny, but kind of like these shorter tours. This was the first real Saudades train tour going all over Europe for 2 or 3 weeks. And that was, at that time, was certainly probably the greatest experience of my life, because the music he's an amazing composer.
Yeah, he is. Yeah.
The musicians in that band, it was Herb Robertson, but Michael Moore was playing saxophone in that tune.
Oh, wow.
And the guy that got us on this club date, Dave Lepedo, was the piano player. And that was, that to me was like, okay, this is all I want to do, is I just want to travel around and play this kind of creative music. And a lot of it was very jazz oriented. He had a lot of kind of like these really kind of cool medium tempo swing tunes, but then we'd have a really wild vamp or something that's more conceptual. And he just had a lot of different, he had a lot of different approaches in the book, to playing. And so then we fit well, and so he just continued carrying me, for the next 20, 30 years of my life.
When did you guys then meet Tony? I remember when we did that record in New York, Tony was still really young. That was like in 2003, I think, or 4. And he already had the Tony thing, like really. When did you guys hook up with Tony?
Well, Tony, I'm really bad with years, but must have been. You said it was 2003.
I mean, you played on Sabino, which is 2000, and we did record in 2003 or 4, I think. Yeah.
So Sabino was 2000. And I guess maybe it was 3 or 4 years before that. Tony, I think, was in New York for a period before he went back to Arizona.
Yeah.
And then in that period, Marty Ehrlich had put together a band with Formanek and Tony and I. And that was the very first time I met Tony. I mean, he put together a band. He had a gig, and that band. And I remember this this image of showing up to the rehearsal, and Tony, Tony's kind of shy because he's not, and we're at Marty's place, and Formanek's there. I knew Formanek, and then Tony just starts warming up, and I think I just sort of have this memory of Formanek kind of looking at each other. Just his sound, it was just like, okay, this is interesting. So then, I just remember the very first time I met. Tony says I met him he said he came up to me at a club in New York and said he was going to play with me one day. I don't actually remember that, but I do remember this rehearsal and us being kind of sort of astonished by his sound, just mostly his sound.
The sound,
But then he, he played great, and I don't know. Eventually, there was this place in New York called the Internet Cafe that was going. Yeah. Tony kind of had almost a residency there, like weekly, and so he just put together different combinations of people. We used to play there a lot, mostly improvised stuff, and then he had a chance to make his first record. Then he did. We did the Sabino record.
Sabino is beautiful. Yeah.
So yeah, it was through, the way it usually happens. You meet somebody at a rehearsal or at a gig or something, and you take an interest in each other, and before you know it,